Hi everyone, my name's Cheryl, the host of Media Talks podcast, and I'm delighted to introduce my second guest, Rowan Bray, the Managing Director of Clear Cut Pictures. Rowan, hello.
Hello.
Nice to meet you officially after all this time.
Absolutely. We've exchanged a few emails.
We have indeed. Well, I really appreciate you being our second guest. And I wanted to talk to you specifically because our first guest was with Kate Bill, who's managing director of Woodcut Media, which is a production company, and you're the managing director of a post house. So I thought there was kind of a nice synergy there. So I'd love to talk to you about what you're doing at the moment, but can we just kind of go back a little bit to when you started at Channel 4 as it launched, which I found.
Well, I didn't start at Channel 4. No, the post-production industry had been getting bigger and healthier over time.
Yeah.
But it was very definitely catalyzed, if you like, by the launch of Channel 4. Because up until that point, most program makers had been making their programs within the BBC ITV, the training schemes, the staff development, the resources were all in-house. And there was a small, healthy post-production sector servicing films and commercials and pop promos and so on. Pop promos were enormous in the 80s, but the program market was largely served in-house. And then along comes Channel 4 with a great big pot of money and a remit to make programs with independent voices. And suddenly those independent voices needed post-production houses. And the market exploded through the 80s as we all responded to that. The existing companies grew. I joined an existing company that was there to service the needs of a film company, Palace, a very famous film company of the 80s. And then we expanded into all this fantastic new broadcast world that was coming out there. And of course, over time, BBC took its production largely. There's still got a very large in-house production unit, but there's also an independent one, and so on and so forth. And so the market grew.
Okay, thank you for that. And tell me, why did you get into post? What was it about post-production that excited you?
Oh, it was a total accident. As 50% of all people who worked in post would tell you, you end up falling into it and falling in love with it. Why? I'd wanted to work in the theatre. That was even harder than working in television. It was really difficult to find my way in on the management side. And so I just basically took a job, and the job was with Televisual Magazine, a magazine we all know to this day.
Yeah.
And I was selling advertising space for them to the post-production companies and the studios and the camera hire companies. And so inevitably, one day one came knocking and said, "Do you want to do that for us?" And I thought it was time to have a change. So I tried it and it worked.
Never looked back?
Never looked back. I could have moved into production, I suppose. I could have worked in lots of different ways, but we work on multiple programs at any one time. Some are in shoots, some are in finishing, some are in delivery, some are still the apple in someone's eye. You know, at any one time we have 80 projects going through. They're fascinating. We work in non-scripted, so we're not working in the dramatic scripted world. We're working with factual programs, with current affairs, with documentaries, with insight into science and medicine and history and geography and the world that we live in, and we expand on that for the viewer with our clients who come up with the most amazing program ideas.
I can see by the way you lit up when you're talking about that. You genuinely love it, don't you? And I guess because of the subject matter, you're learning all the time.
Yeah, our colleagues, especially the editors and the sound mixers, become incredibly useful in specialist rounds in general knowledge quizzes if you get the right question.
I bet.
Yeah. If you get the right question.
If you get the right words, yeah. So tell me, so if you started obviously in post way back when in the not say way back when, but in the 80s, you must have seen, and even in the time I've been in the industry for about 20 years before I set up Media Meerkat, so I've seen it change so much in that space of time. But you're talking sort of a 40-year history. You must have seen huge amounts of change and development. Would you say it for the better, for the worst, just different?
Just different. You're running a business. The issues are the same. We're no longer shooting on tape. we're no longer delivering on tape. It was a little bit more predictable in those days. Now
I remember tape. I remember doing tape.
But you know what? Tape came with disciplines. You know, if you had 10 tapes to go on a shoot, you had to decide what you were going to shoot. Your shooting ratios were a fraction of what we have now.
Yeah.
But then again, now we cut in a totally different way. One of the reasons programs feel old-fashioned is because they're slowly cut. You know, we've gone from 1,200 cuts an hour to 2,000. And you need more material. And we're more ambitious for our programs now because we can be. Equally, you know, we're not having to make a copy of all our rushes on VHS and wander off for a couple of weeks while we watch them all. Maybe if we made every director do that, they'd shoot less. But
there could be a movement in this. There could be a movement.
I've suggested it before. It's never gone down well. But it is all about harnessing technology to do something creative. And that hasn't really changed. It's about training people to have the right skills. It's about having the right passion. It's about clients who've got great ideas, bringing them to screen. And it's about broadcasters being supportive. That one may be, you know, all of those factors are cyclical. We used to rely on the broadcasters to do the training, and the production, the post-production companies would do some on the side. Now that burden is entirely on the independent sector. And there's almost, you know, the broadcasters have programs to provide some training, but they're not providing a lot of training themselves in relative terms.
So how do you help support that?
Well, we have continuous development programs for every member of staff, from the runners who come in on 6-month placements, and they have it takes about 3 months for them to get through everything they've got to learn about security, about the grammar of speaking to clients, about the words that we use, about the processes we use, about what production companies expect in those periods of post-production. And about half of them move on into production with our blessing, because it's a great grounding in what happens in production. The other half stay and move on up into operational roles. I think we'll be announcing one of those this week. There's been some interviewing going on. And then there's a 3.5-year program in the operational world, where they go through enormous quantities of training. And it takes about that long to become a sort of supervisor or a super QCer or a fantastic technical operator, ready to, you know, support onlines and offlines and grades and dubs at the right level. And then, of course, you go on to being an assistant in those departments, and you move on to being a fully fledged creative with the experience of sitting next to clients and delivering what they want against the clock, with all sorts of conflicting demands on your time.
Always. Do you find that it's difficult to retain talent in post, or is that not ever? Like, because obviously I speak to candidates all the time, you know, all day, every day, and some of them have got more experience, some of them may have only graduated, you know, in the last few months or whatever it might be, depending on the year. And so many of them are drawn by the bright lights of, you know, of making and of production and being out on location. And when we talk about post, sometimes they'll see it as like a necessary evil. And I don't mean that in a derogatory time, but they're like, well, I need to understand it, but my career is not going down that path. Or do you find
I think half of the ones that come to us actually end up working in production. The other half have already fixated on post-production. They've been through university, or they've been on courses, and they've tried out grading, and they've seen the magic of the invisible online, and they've seen the fabulous work you can do in audio and so on. For those people, there is no doubt they want to be in post-production. For the people who want to be in production right from the get-go, they're unlikely to come to us in the first place. But we can tell the people in production who have got some post-production experience. Really? They use different words, they use different phrases, they expect a different time frame. They understand that you can't just deliver rushes of 25 hours of rushes and have them all in the next morning unless you planned it that way. We can get 25 hours of rushes in, but not if it all comes on one drive with one port on the end, because there's only one place it can go. So, you know, those bits of experience come into play.
And that's attractive though, right? For someone to someone to work in production that has an understanding of post.
Yeah, absolutely. It's brilliant.
I used to work at ITN and ITN Productions, and sometimes there was that sort of push and pull between the departments of production and post, and it's kind of like you're all there ultimately for the same end goal.
Yeah, absolutely. But equally, you're also all providing a different speciality. And if you weren't, that push and pull gets the balancing right. Because some programs need fantastic amounts of post-production and others don't. And you can't have one lot dominating the rest. It needs to be about what ends up on the screen, the amount of money that's spent to make it look brilliant on the screen, and how much has been placed in the wrong places along the way and makes no difference to what ends up on the screen.
So now I've touched on that, I want to talk about you. You specifically. I want to talk about your career, because you managed a few post houses before you joined Clear Cut in 2017. So talk to me about that journey and what it took to get to becoming managing director of now the Clear Cut Group, which is obviously a conglomerate of a sort of Clear Cut company. What did it take for you? And I don't want this to go down the gender route, because that's not the motive of this, but did it make a difference being a woman in the industry?
Someone wrote to Mr. Bray today, having spent 20 minutes on the phone to me, so that worked well, didn't it? You know what, I don't think you can let gender be a problem, or you can just decide that when gender is a problem, it's somebody else's problem, that they're creating business obstacles. You work around them, or you get on and do something about it. We've all got feet. We can walk with our feet. We can move on. I haven't ever encountered gender in the industry, funnily enough, as a total obstacle. I've come across it where it's become an awkwardness or a difficulty, but you show capability, you show skill, you show knowledge, and generally people go, that's much more important. And the fact that she's a girl is just a bit unexpected. And then they realize it isn't unexpected. Our senior management team, actually, it's currently more girls than boys. And the boys are fine with that. I did actually ask one of them the other day in readiness for this, and they said yes, they were fine with that. But it could easily be the other way around. And if everybody's there because they've earned their place at the table, it's fine. But how do you earn that place at the table? That's the question you're really asking, isn't it? It's not about the gender item. So I was very lucky. I worked for the big film companies, post-production house, for quite a few years, and then through a series of changes of ownership, we ended up working with somebody else. So I saw a whole load of corporate things happen that I didn't expect. And then that company changed hands again, and I worked for a different set of masters. And in so doing, I learned a lot about different people's attitudes and different ways of doing things. And then I moved on, and the company I went to had a need for me to understand their finances much deeper than I'd ever had to understand them before. So I did that. And then some days along comes some HR problem. So you do that. And you learn as you go. Lifelong learning is a brilliant phrase. It's true. Every step of the way, you're learning as you go. There'll be something I learned today. You learn by your mistakes. You learn by handling the situation incorrectly, by failing to communicate early enough, by failing to share your idea with somebody else so that they get behind the stick, by not resourcing people as they need to be resourced. But if you've done it for a while, you make fewer of those mistakes at the coalface. You might catch yourself beforehand, but hopefully not too often. And you make sure everyone's got what they want. And if they've all got what they need, then they'll do a good job because you've recruited them because they're good at what they do.
Just before you started that conversation, you said you were lucky. Were you lucky? Did luck come into it? Were you given the opportunities, or did you have to work for them?
Yeah, luck comes into it, because I was serving in my other life outside of being the MD of Clear Cut. I have always served on committees about training and resourcing and bringing people on that are cross-sectoral or their post-production secure. One of my jobs, it was someone else that was on the committee with me, and he said, "For coffee," because we need someone like you. And I went, the opportunity is fantastic. So I went on and I joined a different company, and they did something completely different to the pure post-production I've been working in. And I learned a load of new things from that. So luck comes into it. You make your luck because you network, and you are nice to everybody, and you make yourself capable, and you deliver on your promises. And that immediately makes me think of all the promises I haven't delivered on yet, but I will.
I actually was thinking the same. I was thinking, oh, I must do that today.
Exactly. But, you know, you make luck, but luck does come your way.
Why did you join Clearcut in 2017?
They'd asked me back in 2013, 14 if I joined them, and it didn't seem like the right time. But the company had a great reputation. We're 30 years old this year. We're one of the oldest, most established post houses in the market. And it was technically well known. But it struck me as being a company that it would give me some challenges. It wasn't going to be an easy ride. It had had a couple of different changes of leadership. The ownership has always been the same. Someone with great passion and insight, and who cares a great deal about his team and about the business and about delivering good service. So the underpinning was there, but the leadership had changed a bit, and it had lost its way a little bit. And so I had the opportunity to come in and just remind everyone how good they were. And that's not a difficult thing to do. And so the great work they were doing, the great facilities they had, the great reputation the company was built on, and they all got their mojo back. And I then took the credit. It was very difficult because I did the easy bit. They were doing the hard bit. But yeah, it presented challenges I hadn't had for a while, and I was ready for a new challenge. So it was serendipity. The timing was right. There's that little bit of lady luck coming in.
Mm-hmm. What does it take to be a managing director of a post house? What does it take? Even forget the skills for a second, because you've obviously spent a long time honing those. And like you said earlier, you've kind of gone into different areas and you've had to learn financing when that wasn't necessarily part of your initial remit. But what mindset does it take? Does it take a specific type of attitude to get to where
you've got to have total belief in the product. And if you don't believe in the product, you've got to do something about it. You've got to have utter gratitude to the clients. Not sort of fawningly so, but you've got to recognise the relationship between the clients and their issues, because broadcasters are being very tricky in terms of budget, in terms of commitment, in terms of timing. We live in a world where broadcasters have to have programmes, and production companies have to have commissions, and post-production companies have to have clients. But we've created a model in which broadcasters have to have programs, but they are very short term. The production and post-production companies rely on their decision making, but their decision making is very short term. So everyone is trying to build a business, whether that's resourcing fantastic production teams or whether it's trying to service the needs of an enormous technical operation and infrastructure, which is all fully paid for and all fully staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All of that is relying on a slightly unreliable central source. And then you get, government interference things. So I think you've got to be able to see ahead. You've got to be quite resilient. I find it quite lonely at times. It's quite difficult. I do talk to my senior management team and go, what am I going to do about this? But sometimes I feel I'm burdening them with things that they didn't sign up to have to help make decisions about, how we flex the business or how we fund things and so on. But they are very willing to talk to me and very willing to give their opinions, and they're great at doing it. But nonetheless, it can be quite lonely. You do need resilience. You've got to have utter positivity. You've got to have belief in yourself and others. There's all characteristics. They're all, and you've got to be a bit humble as well. It doesn't always go right.
That's the truth. But how do you maintain that, and how have you maintained that for such a long career? Because we all have ups and downs. You've got things in your personal life, which I'm sure over the time has proved challenging to blend the two. How have you managed to do that and still remain top of the game?
Well, I took the children into work. That was
Did you?
one of the things I did.
Love
I think
it.
working from home has been a fantastic blessing. Which, you know, it's difficult to work from home when you're meant to be around. People will tell you things over the coffee machine. They won't tell you when you're on the phone. And you'll spot things that you can do something about. That,
Yeah.
you know, life's difficult for people for unexpected reasons. So sometimes seeing them struggling with something, you can solve it. But I've got a fantastic supportive husband and parents. They more need me now than I need them. But when the kids were growing up, couldn't have done it without them. So a network, a resource, honesty. I have colleagues who have young children. We have people who have dogs. We have people who have broken washing machines and gas men need to come. We accept that we work to live. We don't live to work. So we're a very supportive team. We can be very honest with each other.
Has COVID changed that, do you think? Did COVID change that for you?
I don't think it changed the culture I would like to promote in a company. I think that was there already.
Okay.
I think COVID has made working from home acceptable, when before it was something people were slightly embarrassed by. I think it's created a better environment for part-time working, though I think part-time working is very difficult to achieve in post-production for other reasons. I think no, I think we had that culture. You don't live to work, you work to live. And that means people are humans. You recognize their humanity and their difference and celebrate it.
I love that. There does not so much now. I mean, obviously I run my own agency now, but when I was a producer and director, it was very much that you were just kind of it was the industry, you were expected. Those out of hours is just normal. You know, you have to deliver. You have to stay in the edit suite until 10 p.m. if that's what it takes, because you have to deliver. So that work-life balance to me is interesting, especially from a post perspective, because your demand schedule is so much stronger than so many other aspects of production that, you know, I mean, I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong, but to have a schedule where you're like, well, I need to go at 4 because I have a dentist, but if you've got to deliver, do you not have to just stay?
Yeah, you do. I mean, last week somebody had some bad news, and we said we'll get one of the others to take over. You go, and they went, no, I'm going to get it finished. I'm going to get it out the door, and I'm going to go, and then don't expect to see me for a couple of days while I get this sorted out. So the staff are incredibly professional, and they're really slick, and they're very determined. But we do cover for each other, and crises do emerge. I think for me, admitting I got engaged in the 80s and then went on to get married in the 80s, the idea that you might have a husband who might have calls on your time was quite a shocker. And then having children was relatively unusual. Most people were wedded to their jobs. Now I think it's much more common. I think the majority of people have partners and lives and children. But the nature of production is that we have to accept we've chosen to do this.
Yes.
And we've chosen to do this because we love doing it, and we love bringing those stories to the screen, and we love finding out about the horrors and the successes of life and telling those stories. And it does require you to be up against the deadline. And being in post-production, it all slides and slides and slides. And the thing that doesn't slide is the delivery deadline. So we're always a bit squashed as a sandwich in the middle. So I suppose all of those things come to bear. It's fine. That's what we signed up for. We are fairly lucky because as a full-time cohort of staff, we can plan our lives. So our operators and our runners and our bookings people have a relatively predictable shift system. That's not to say they don't go through the night. Doesn't mean to say that we don't, take calls in the evenings and through the night and on the weekends. If we're meant to be Monday to Friday, we do. All of us do. And the operators might have thought they were going to finish at 6, but they actually get out at 3 in the morning because there was more work to do than expected. But, you know, we do try and plan for that. We do try and spot that coming. We can look at what the offline looks like before it gets into online. We can try and talk to the client about the legal pitfalls we might just be falling into as we get to right to reply and that sort of thing. So we try and work around.
Would you say that a career in post is unsociable?
No, but it's predictably unsociable. So if you're a runner, you know which evening you're going to be working the evenings, which weekend you're expected to come and cover. If you're an operator, you know when you're going to be asked to do a night shift or an evening shift or a long weekend. But equally, you also know which Monday and Tuesday you're going to get off in return, or which weekends you're not going to be asked to work. Or if you are, you'll be given some overtime for it or some time off in lieu. More likely time off in lieu. I have anything to do with it, obviously. But you know, because money. The one I think that can be unsociable and which we watch over like a hawk is the dubbing mixers, the online editors, the colorists, because that's where you can't always plan it and they get caught out and they miss theatre tickets and concerts. But then we give them time back and we try and understand that they are working mums, that they are working dads, that they have got partners and so on.
I love that. Do you feel that COVID and our whole work from home, so I'm quite an advocate of hybrid working. I think hybrid working is important. I think our industry was probably the last industry to have ever adopted it had COVID not come along. I think it was very much a bum on a seat culture. I think it's less like that now, but I can imagine in post that's tricky. Or not?
No, actually it's doable.
Okay.
The only people who can't really work from home some of the time are the receptionists and the runners, because you can't make a cup of coffee at a distance. However, the operators get turns working from home. All the editors, the colorists, the sound guys can do it for some tasks, but not for all. You know, if you're meant to be in a soundproof room with fantastic acoustic qualities, if you're meant to be in a grading room where the light has been balanced with very expensive consultants to get it absolutely right, and you're using a £30,000 monitor and you're running your huge 4K files directly off a server, you don't want to be doing that from 30 miles down the road. So they would choose to come in. But equally, our post producers, our engineers, our operators, our accounts people, they can all be at home some of the time. What we are beginning to realise is that it's not a good idea to allow too much hybrid. Because too much hybrid, it's not an entitlement, it's a benefit when we can do it. And we're beginning to realise that those water cooler moments, those team bonding exercises, those impromptu conversations have a really big value. And sometimes an online editor will just say in passing in the corridor to the colorist, oh, by the way, you're going to need to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And the colorist, really? He said, oh, well, I thought you probably knew about that. Did you not know about that? And you can't do that working from home. You can't train people working from home. You can't have a relationship with your colleague about the fact that they're having a shed being delivered this weekend and they're building a patio at home and they've broken 3 of their fingers doing it. You can't do any of that when you're all working hybridly. So if you want people to feel a spirit of belonging to each other and to belonging to the clients and to be great trainers and trainers and trainees and mentors and mentees, then you need to bring people together. Not all the time, but some of the time.
We're seeing a shift in the number of clients that are asking for a greater proportion of people being in. So, you know, last year it was lots of entirely remote working. Interestingly for me, it's still one of the first questions I get asked by a candidate is, do I get to work from home? Or how often can I work from home? Which I find an unusual mindset for someone that wants to be in our industry. do you see it, I mean, you've touched on it anyway, but do you see that being a much more shift of, like you said, it's not standard, it's kind of not a luxury is not the right word, but it's kind of a privilege to be able to do a bit of both, but you really need to be weighted in the office more.
Yeah, I mean, last year we had a couple of productions that said we'll only be using offline editors who will work in the office, because we believe we can do a much better job working across a series of episodes in the same series if everybody's together. And then, of course, there was a great demand on editors. The editors went, I'm working from home. And they all went, fine, thank you for taking the booking. and that was the end of it. There is not a lot of work out there at the moment. And people are taking jobs based on the fact that they will work in the office. And the moment they start, they negotiate some working from home.
Okay.
And because everyone's met each other and because everyone knows it can be done, everyone's being quite flexible and quite nimble. That means we've got to do things differently. Because at the moment, if they want to work in the office, they book an edit suite in a room and they pay us for that. If they book an edit suite in a crate in a computer room without a room attached to it, they pay us a lesser amount. But at the moment, they're choosing to pay more and spend their budget that way because they don't know when their staff want to come in or not. So we as a sector, I think, will be moving to, you've booked a crate in a machine room, and when you want a room, we'll charge you some quid on top for the day that you're in and the runners are there and so on. Because when you've got 10 runners working across the sites and they're twiddling their thumbs because no one came in today because it's a beautiful day, and there's like 3 clients to make coffee for and they're taking it in turns to make the coffees, then you've obviously got you can't absorb the battering that the budgets are getting and the inflation of our utilities and our technology and our service provision. You can't absorb that if you're also expected to provide that service when and as people want to come in.
Yeah.
So production managers are going to have to accept that there's going to be a paradigm shift to remote working as the standard, and we'll have rooms available when you want to come and work together. But that requires communication and planning. The one I think will happen is that you start your job with maybe a week in the office. Everyone gets going, everyone gets to know each other, everyone gets a plan in place. Then you go and do 3 weeks remote working when you're at home, just poddling along, doing your thing and sending playouts out regularly and chatting on the phone and Zoom and all these other magical things we've got. And then at the other end of it, you'll come back together for the fine cut the last 2 weeks when everyone's picking over the small bits. And sense. Then, you know, you don't attend the track lays anyway. You don't attend the pre-grades or the conforms. So you'll come in and you'll view your onlines, your grades, your sound as needed.
That makes sense, adapting.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about a lack of jobs this year. So last year, I'm sure it was the same for you, but we all boomed, everything boomed. There were so many jobs, not enough people available. It was kind of crazy. This year, very stark contrast. What, from your perspective, or from whatever you can tell us, what's happened?
Oh, I think we've all gone through the same thing. There's no point in pretending that commissions are all on pause. You know, Channel 4 and Channel 5 said they'd get going again in September. The truth is they have got going. They've fulfilled their promise, but they've not exactly got going with alacrity. It's coming. We are already facing the fact that the advertising revenue model doesn't necessarily work. The subscription model is under threat when we're in, you know, straitened economic times. That was always going to be the case. But there's also a boom and bust cycle that we go through in this sector.
Yeah.
I referred to earlier, broadcasters don't make commitments to production companies beyond one commission at a time. And you can do the most amazing commission. You can win 100 awards. It might open the door for you to chat to a commissioning editor about another idea. It doesn't give you any entitlement to expect another commission.
No.
I know everyone thinks that gives them the best possible creative outcomes. I'm not sure it does. Because everyone's having to start again.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Production teams can't gel and become, you know, forces for good because they're dissipated at the end of every production.
Yeah, I know that.
So, I mean, interesting, the Chinese model. Okay, China's a very different market. They've got billions of viewers, and they've got this, everything state managed. But you will be given a commission to do 200 hours of science programs over the next 3 years. So when that happens, your production company goes, right, you need to make 200 hours. We've got to have all these. You still get to sign those ideas off with your broadcaster. You can't just make 200 hours on, using bicarbonate of soda to make a volcano on the kitchen table. You can't do that. You've got to do, right, we're going to make 10 on this and 10 on that and 10 on the other. But you've got economies of scale, you can build it, and your post-production company can win that contract, and they can build their staffing accordingly. But in this country, we work, you're lucky if you get 20 in one series. And when you do, you have to compromise on the budget to win it.
Do you see that, you touched on the fact that the advertising and the commissioners, everything's changing. Do you see that changing in the next year? It's been everyone I've spoken to has had a challenging year. So everyone's also wondering what's coming in the next 12 to 18 months because of that cycle that's been different this year. Do you see AI playing a part in all of that?
Hang on, has that cycle really been different this year? Actually, if you look at 2008, boom years in 2009, or 10 maybe, and then a bit of a pause in 2011 as everyone reset because the advertising had dried up and they'd run out of money and the subscribers were difficult, and then it came back to normal levels. I think this isn't. 2001 was the same, 1992 in the Broadcasting Act. What happens is you have something that holds everything back. Then there's a massive push for commissions. Then there's the opposite, as everyone goes, whoa, we spent a lot of money, and it's actually whatever was the catalyst for that pullback in the first place. We're often the first into difficult times. I'm not using the recession word. No. We're often the first in, but we're also the first out. We've got 7 weeks of rugby coming up. So the normal time to launch all the best programs will be September and October in the run-up to Christmas. The rugby, 7 weeks of that, that's going to take up a lot of time on the telly. And, we had international athletics the other day and the Tour de France. The mainstream channels are putting these things out on the peak time broadcasting. That's taking away slots. We can't rely on the streamers. They, their model is changing. The PSBs are where we have a domestic market that will underpin the majority. That's moving to the regions. That's a healthy thing. We've got a Birmingham office from which we service work in Norwich and Glasgow and Bristol and all sorts of places. It's a healthy model. I think that's a good thing for the country. But nonetheless, all of these political changes change the model. Most post-productions in London, most commissions are not in London. We can't move very fast. Production companies can move. They just move up the road and they just open an office and they base themselves there. And if it works, they stay.
Yeah.
And they develop talent. Post-production, it would cost us millions to move.
Yeah.
I know. We just opened our Birmingham office formally in a new space with more capacity. But there is a real change going on, and we don't need people to try and privatize Channel 4 so they redirect their resources to their corporate needs rather than their production needs. We don't need people to threaten the BBC with a change of life. Let these things happen organically, and they'll be much gentler on the industry.
Nice. Lastly, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give somebody that was starting out in post now? Bearing in mind the market we're in, whether that's normal or not, but what would you?
I think it's the same advice as I'd ever give. Don't run before you can walk. You've got a lot to learn. You may have done a course, you may have got a family member, you may have any number of reasons to believe you're ready to be an editor or ready to be a colorist. But the truth of the matter is, they don't teach you what an AS11 is in university. They don't teach you about budgets and deadlines and working in a team, a professional team, and working with people who've got way more experience than you. You've got so much to learn. Just build your networks, start at the bottom, let it take a bit of time, and enjoy it as you go along.
Amazing. And last question for you. What are you most excited about for the next 12 months?
oh, I don't know what we've got around the corner. I don't know the productions we're going to necessarily. I know quite a few of them, I hope. Otherwise, I'm really worrying. But, you know, we know the ones we're going to make in the next few weeks and months. And some of those are really terrific. But we don't know the ones we're going to make in 6 to 9 months' time. And we don't know the ones that are going to make us build a new resource or reconfigure our technology or make us scratch our heads because it's interesting in some other way.
But that's also exciting, right?
Yeah, it's great. I don't know who I'll be working with this time. I hope I know, but I don't know. You know, I hope we'll see people, you know, flower and blossom and turn into the fantastic people they're going to be and take on new skills and surprise us. Those are all, you know, and there'll be change and there'll be unexpected turns on the road. And that's the exciting bit. It's never the same.
Rowan, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate your time today.
Pleasure for me too.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.